The last time I saw Maris is such a brilliant Frasier episode. This is the 8th episode of the 3rd season. It's directed by Philip Charles MacKenzie, and there will be spoilers from now as I talk about various aspects of the episode. My thoughts are all chronological, so we'll go through the episode and I'll explain what happens and share some thoughts along the way. But to sum up very briefly, it's brilliant. It's very funny at times. I have some personal highlights that I'll mention, but it's also very moving, very thought-provoking, and I think an episode that some people could really benefit from if they're perhaps in a similar situation to Niles. It starts off down at KACL, and then Frasier gets a phone call from Niles saying that Maris is missing. The next thing we know, we are in Niles' home with Daphne, Martin, and Frasier. I like the fact that they all came together to be there for Niles while he was struggling with the emotions that come with not knowing where Maris is. It turns out she's been missing for 3 days, and Niles has only just realised. So Martin is on the phone, and he finds out that actually her credit card has recently been used multiple times in places like Tiffany's in New York. And Niles realises that this is Maris, particularly because she hasn't been to any restaurants. So he realises she must have gone to New York, and he's relieved. He's overcome with relief, as anyone would imagine. But Frasier isn't. Frasier is very, very annoyed. Because, and this is really sweet, I think this is a lovely reaction for Frasier to have, because it shows he really cares about Niles. He is annoyed that Maris would dare do that to Niles, to just take off and leave without telling him, without communicating with him. Obviously, he's going to be out of his mind with worry, and Frasier is very angry. And as he expresses this anger, it starts to come out in Niles. And Niles begins to smash things. And that is kind of an intense moment, but we do also have some comedy in there as well. I think if everybody had just been watching him smash things up, it might have been almost uncomfortable. Effective, but uncomfortable. But because everybody's kind of getting involved, Daphne is telling him not to smash this vase, but to smash this ugly ornament instead. It makes it a little bit more, well, a little bit less uncomfortable, I guess. And Marta, obviously having heard this chaos, comes downstairs. Niles tells her it's great, she should try it. So she does. She picks up this, I think it was a glass bowl on the table, and just drops it. And it's just delightful. And her expression is wonderful. And it's a funny scene, but it's also quite awkward, but in a way that's very effective. It's very much what I can imagine this kind of scenario playing out like. We then cut to the lift in Frasier's building, and we have Daphne, Martin, and Frasier going back home. They've apparently been out for 3 hours. Daphne remarks that Eddie will have a full bladder, and as soon as they open the door, out comes Eddie carrying his leash in his mouth straight into the elevator. It's just the cutest scene ever. We also have a lovely moment, well, Martin might not think it's lovely, but we have this great moment between Daphne and Martin where Martin says he just wants to go inside and unbuckle his trousers because he's just eaten a lot of meat. They've been out for dinner, and Daphne grabs him by the collar and tells him he's coming with her to take Eddie for a walk. And it's just that bond between them. I love seeing it. It's so wonderful. While they're out walking Eddie, Frasier goes into his apartment and Niles is there. And he reveals that he confronted Maris, and now he's had to leave the house. And it's quite funny, in particular, Frasier's response to everything, because Niles keeps getting close to some ornaments and artifacts that Frasier has, and he thinks Niles is going to start smashing things. So Frasier just moving things around the apartment is quite interesting. It's an unusual situation to be in as a Niles fan, because on the one hand, I don't think Niles deserves to put up with what he does with Maris, but at the same time, I don't want to see him hurting. But having said that, he's not showing signs of hurting, and that in itself is a problem, and we'll come back to that in a little bit, but clearly it's bothering him in some ways, even if he's not able to express it. But we will come back to that in a bit, because it is relevant. Meanwhile, there is a phone call to Frasier's, and it is Maris, and Maris has asked Niles for a divorce. So Frasier does the sensible thing? I don't think so. But he decides to go to Maris and confront her, and he's shouting up at the window, and he ends up getting drenched. It's a brief scene. They could have made it longer, but I feel like the timing was perfect. The point there is that I think they could have done a bit more with that, and if they did, it could have been good. But also, I liked what we got. Bit of a moot point, to be perfectly honest. we then have the rest of the episode focusing on Niles's inability to express his emotions while also seemingly having this kind of internal breakdown. He has left what they think is potentially a suicide note, but it's not. He comes into the apartment very quickly after they find it. He's bought some jeans, he's rented an apartment, he's considering going to the gym. Frasier tells him he's in denial. And they then go to his house, well, Maris's house, I guess I should say, because he's got to get all of his possessions out, and finally he succumbs to his emotions and he finally has an outburst, and Frasier is encouraging it, and I think that's a really healthy thing to do, because if you bottle your emotions, it's never going to be effective. So obviously it's going to be probably very healthy for Niles to get those emotions out. It seems like it's unclear what he's going to do, and a spanner is thrown in the works when Marta comes downstairs just as they're kind of getting ready to leave, and she tells Niles that Maris had said if he admits everything is his fault, he can stay. Which is disgusting, because it's 100% Maris's fault. Not that I'd expect anything different from Maris, but I'm struggling to understand her logic. What was his fault? It was his fault that she went to New York without telling him? I'm not sure I can understand even Maris's logic there. And Frasier is giving him this giant speech, very well written, brilliantly performed, about, and I quote, just make sure that you're remembering things the way they really were, which I think is such a great takeaway from this episode. And Frasier points out, as an example, Niles was talking about the chair he loved that they bought in Vienna, but Frasier pointed out that actually Niles had wanted a chair in Paris, but Maris got her way and they got the chair from Vienna. So even though there are things that he thinks were positives, and they're happy memories. Yes, the memories might be happy, but he needs to look at the bigger picture and realise the reality of the situation. And I think that that's great advice for anybody in anything that they do. And then Frasier ends his speech by mentioning Lilith accidentally, which I loved. And then Martin very sweetly, so beautifully, just told Niles, if you choose to stay, we'll support you. If you choose to go, we'll support you. And I think that was wonderful. And then he thought Niles was about to stay and he basically shouted at him, but Niles was actually just getting his keys. So it was a funny episode with some really great moments, but also a very moving episode and very important in a lot of ways. But I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it's a really, really strong episode. The last time I saw Maris is, all things considered, I'd say about as perfect as an episode can be. The balance is brilliant, it's entertaining, it's funny, but I think it could benefit a lot of people as well, and ultimately, I can't fault it.